Now, there we are. I wanted to make sure that we had everybody here when I lifted the veil. And there he is. And there we are. I would say, oh, yes, but I have to tell you, I'm a little bit excited. I'm excited for today's show, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, boy.
Since we are doing our live show the morning after, we don't have to play by the constraints of the Press Row show. We are allowed to talk about this game however we want. And all I will say is that last night's game was an embarrassment. And you go out west and you lose to a previously winless team, an 0-10-1 team. And I get that it's a rebuild, and we're going to get into it. But it's an absolute embarrassment to lose to San Jose. And we have a lot to get into today. I know that people are already upset. There are people upset yesterday about Morgan Frost. There are people upset this morning about Morgan Frost. I have lots and lots of questions about the coach. I have lots of questions about the power play. I have lots of questions about tactics or the lack thereof. But before I go off on typical Russ rants, I want to get to the people who you are actually here to listen to. Ant SanFilippo in the middle, Bundy on the right at Therien 6. Ant, I'm going to go to you for a little bit of morning love this morning. How are you doing?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you that it's a bad loss, right? You can't lose. The San Jose Sharks this season, in the end, when we get to April, are going to be one of the worst teams in the history of the league, statistically. They just are. Whether it's their record is going to be really bad, or they're not going to score a lot of goals, or going to give up a ton of goals, the goal differential will be off the charts. So to lose to a team like that, it should not happen. But I'm not going to sit here, and I know fans are upset, and they can be upset. They have the right to be upset. I get it. But, I mean, this team is what we thought they were, to steal a line from the great Denny
Dennis Green?
Yeah.
Dennis Green?
They are who they're a team that can't score enough goals, the Flyers. And really, when you look at the game last night, I mean, it's a little bit uneven. There's a lot of power plays, both sides. The power play sucks. It absolutely sucks. But we know that. We knew that it sucked, and there's not enough talent here to make it any different. So they could try whatever they want. They can have them doing pirouettes on the ice, in figure eights all the way around the offensive zone. It ain't going to matter what they do. The power play is not going to be good with this group of forwards. But overall, I thought that they controlled the game. They just didn't score. So you really what does it come down to? It comes down to the fact that they had 39 shots on goal and only got one past the goalie. The Sharks goalie played all right. He played fine, whatever. But it wasn't like he stood on his head, though, against 39 shots. I thought that the Flyers, didn't really take advantage of opportunities and chances. And that's what's going to happen with a team that's not very good. And don't get caught up in the moment. My biggest takeaway is don't get caught up in the fact that you lost to the San Jose Sharks. Sharks are going to win 10 games this year, 12 games, whatever they win, right? This just happened to be one of them. Don't get caught up in the fact that you lost to the Sharks. Get caught up in the fact that the development that you want to see out of the players on this Flyers team has hit a little bit of a roadblock right now. And that should be something where the concern is, because it doesn't matter really ultimately who the opponent is. We saw them play great games against Stanley Cup contenders already this season, right? So the fact that they had a bad game against a bad team is irrelevant. What it is the relevancy is the progression of the players, and I think that they've kind of flatlined a little bit from where they started the season.
I think that's fair. Bundy, where do you land the morning after losing to the previously winless San Jose Sharks?
Fucking sucks, Russ.
Oh, boy! There it is! There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, if you had, I don't know what the over-under was, but just about 5 minutes, a little bit under 5 minutes.
First word today. Not first time ever it led with the Bundy bomb. You know what, though? I am pissed today. And you know what? This was like a whole I don't know what went on in the last 2 days before the game. But you're right, Anthony. There's been some backward progression. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know how much players go in and see listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Morgan Frost is an all-star or Wayne Gretzky. He's not. But on a team that can't score, you have to use the young guy that acquired most of the points for you last year. Okay, I get he's not in Torts' plans. Would this be the first young guy that Torts cast off to an island and just said, you know what, the hell with, he's never going to play in this league? No. He's done this numerous times to numerous players in his long tenure as a coach in this league. So I don't think it's all, you're not going to put it in a situation where you're going to blame Morgan Frost. Like, I mean, somebody wants to, but I'll say this, in the spirit of fairness, none of the Morgan Frost benching has been fair. If you're basing it on play and results, I could pick one of 5 fucking guys that could come out of the lineup for Morgan Frost. And again, the Flyers signed Paling in the offseason. Has he been a good acquisition? Yeah. It's a 4th-line guy. He's not supposed to be married to a 4th-line job. Move him out of the lineup, move Lawton into the center slot in the 4th line, and find a way to put Frost in. The other thing you're doing is you're devaluing. Every time he doesn't play, you're not showcasing him to send him anywhere unless you're just saying, here's what he did last year. He's a point-producing player. I'm not really sure what the disdain is for him, because to me, I think he's an effective enough hockey player. Guys, we watch players in this league every night, and you're like, holy shit. Like, it makes me want to think maybe I should get in shape again. Sometimes. Obviously, I know that's not going to work. But, like, there's just not enough good players or offensive players. And like as Anthony said, on a team that can't score. So someone's got a boner for him. Pretty clear who. And at the same time, you're not going to be able to switch gears and then just say, oh, we want to move him now, because you haven't been able to even showcase what he's able to do right now. Now, I think if I'm another GM and I can get him for cheap, I would try right now. Because do I think you're winning a cup with him as a top-line guy? No. This is a rebuild. But if you're rebuilding and you're trying to get guys in there, you need to use your assets to try to flip the lineup. In him in the press box, I just don't understand it at this point. I told a story on Flyers pregame radio last night, and I'll use me as an example, but it's happened to hundreds of guys, thousands of guys in the league. You get challenged as a player certain times in your career. And I believe that's a really good thing, like to try to bring out the best in you. And 3 years in the league, I had a pretty easy coast, thought I was doing good. But when I look back at it now, I wasn't. I was just doing what I had to do to get by. And so someone in the coaches, Terry Murray at the time, asked me to do a lot more, to be better than I was. And he realized it, and they said there's more there. So I went out. I got benched for 9 out of 12 games, and I came back in the lineup, and I was a completely different player. And I do believe now when I look back that was for the player. That was for the team, make the player better for the betterment of the team. But when you have a player that's getting benched repeatedly, he's created chances, you already know his confidence is down. Why would you ball kick him another time? Because you're eventually going to lose that player. And the other thing, no one likes to admit this, but when you do things repeatedly to a player on a team, the other guys on the team take notice. And believe me, whether they want to say it or not, it does affect people in there and it shouldn't, but it does, because people end up being human beings at the end of the day. Morgan Frost is a good teammate to guys. It's going to tick them off. Like Travis Sanheim last year. Why bench a guy in his hometown? Like, why sit a guy out at a healthy scratch in his town where he had 12 family members going to it? Those are things that aren't necessary. It didn't make Travis Sanheim any better. You know, there's doing things the right way, and there's doing things I just don't think that are the right way. But you have a point but someone's trying to make a point. Someone's trying to fill in a blank somewhere. But I just don't think that blank is there to be filled in with this team. This is who they are. We shouldn't be surprised. Now, listen, in fairness to what we said, Anthony, I know you want to jump in. We all picked the Flyers to kick the living shit out of San Jose last night. We did. I thought they would walk on this team. And, yeah, the goalie played good. But the Flyers, as you say it, they can't finish. They don't have goal scorers. And they keep on shoving the same guys out again to try to find a goal. I wish I had a coach as invested in me scoring one goal as Torts is with some of those guys right now on his forward lines. So, again, I'm being facetious and joking, but I mean, what more do you got to do? They can't score anyway. Whether you put it on, they couldn't shoot it in the ocean right now, and that's a fact. So one goal they scored in the last 2 games, and the one game they couldn't score against was a team that just gave up 20 goals in 2 games against. The Flyers got 1, and I'm not even sure that was a 1. People are saying it was a Farabee goal. I don't know if it even went in. They called it a goal, but anyway, that's what you're dealing with. That's the honest to God truth of where they're at with the team. Maybe some people won't like that take, but that's the truth. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, my problem with the Morgan Frost thing, and I mean, I've said this many times. I'm not a guy who thinks Morgan Frost is a player in this league, right? But my problem with it is the coach doesn't justify publicly why he's doing this to this guy, right? I mean, you sit him for 6 straight games, and you don't really say anything. You basically say, I'm not going to change the lineup. Things are going well. Okay, fine. You took him out, and then you rode some success with the lineup you had. Well, then you struggle. And look, you could have picked any number of players to come out of that lineup. Not that when Morgan Frost came back in, he was suddenly a world beater, right?
Yes.
He wasn't, right?
No.
He wasn't a world beater, but he also wasn't terrible. It's not like you sat there and watched Morgan Frost play and you went, oh, man, he was bad. Like, if you wanted to find a player who had played terrible against Los Angeles, for example, and you wanted to pull them out for this game to send another message, you could have pulled Cam York from the lineup, right? Yes. And he didn't, okay? I think Owen Tippett has been...
Oh, by the way, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but, like, not only did he not pull Cam York, but he said in comments leading up to yesterday's game that, like, Cam York has a blank slate. Despite not playing well, like despite having multiple games. I don't want to interrupt you. Like we'll get into that.
No. But I mean,
but he's essentially just kind of gone like carte blanche, selective carte blanche for certain guys on the roster.
Yeah,
Continue.
No, and so, and then he was asked about it after the game last night. Kevin Kurz from the Athletic asked him about taking Frost out, and he gave a one-word answer, and that was it. And it's like, look, you can make coaching decisions. And whatever your coaching decisions are and the reasons that you have for them, whatever they are. But you got to kind of give something to the fans, even if it's a little bit of lip service. You can't just ignore it and keep ignoring it. And that's where I have an issue with what's happening. Give us a reason. Tell us what you don't like about the way he's playing.
Yeah.
That oh, okay, all right. And let us judge whether or not we want to say that that's fair or not. But give us something. Otherwise, it just seems personal. And I want to throw one more thing out there about the whole Morgan Frost thing, because I think that there might be an element of this too. So, as everyone knows, Morgan Frost signed his contract very late. It was right before the start of training camp. It was an all summer long thing, right, with Morgan Frost. The Flyers obviously have changed the way that they're playing their system a little bit. They're trying to be a little bit more aggressive offensively. They're trying to generate more to get that forecheck going. We've heard Torts talk about it a few times, and he says, we're going to need our goalies to help bail us out a few times because we're going to push it a little bit more than we did a season ago. And so that's something that you start instilling in the summer. As a matter of fact, it starts to get instilled in the summer before camp even starts, right, Bundy? I mean, these guys start showing up early in August, right? And they're working and they're practicing. If it should not, even though the coaches aren't out there and it's just the guys on the ice, don't be fooled. That is certainly organized practice in way. There are things that those guys are doing and are practicing doing that they're being told to do, okay? Morgan Frost wasn't part of that because he wasn't signed. And I think that the fact that Morgan Frost and his agent dragged the Flyers along to get that contract done probably pisses off Torts more than anything, because it meant that he wasn't able to really take part in that team work in the summertime. And so therefore, if every little mistake is going to be highlighted or magnified even more in Tortorella's mind with Morgan Frost than with any other player who was there and part of it and has been, working together since the summer.
Okay.
Again, that's
so fucking stupid.
Well, I mean, it's just conversation that I hear, and I'm talking.
I'm not saying you're stupid. I'm not even saying you're fucking stupid. I'm just saying that's stupid.
No, but it is true though, Russ.
Go ahead, buddy.
No, there is a little truth to that. But guys can't. Like, I saw Morgan Frost before he'd signed. I went in and spoke to the team one morning, just a lot of the young guys in development camp. And he was unsigned, but he was in there working out with Tippett. Like, I was down in the little gym area. So you do stuff. It's when you get later in camp, when negotiations get a little hairy and you haven't signed yet. And then you kind of stay away from the rink a little bit. But no coach ever gets ticked off at a player for signing late, or because that's really none of his business. That's the business side of it. It has nothing to do with coaching. I don't know. It's just odd. And again, and to me, it's not fair. It's just not fair. Like that's the part for me. Like if I'm looking as a coach, I'm looking at the roster. Unless you just completely hate a guy, you want to sit him out. That looks like maybe what it is. But if you're going to do it fairly, there's other guys that could have come out of the lineup.
Oh, easily. And one other thing I want to say, well, since we're on the Morgan Frost train here, a lot of fans, and not just those who are commenting here, although there's been a few comments in here about it, but I've seen it on Twitter a lot since yesterday, since it was announced that Frost wasn't going to play. There's a lot of people who think that Danny is not in step with this and needs to step in and do something about it. Now, there's a nuanced way of saying that, and the first part I'm going to say is this. Danny is fully on board with what Torts is doing. So keep that in mind up front. I don't think Danny is a huge fan of Morgan Frost either. That said, where I agree with the fans is I think Danny could, since his coach isn't explaining it, Danny could explain it. Maybe Danny or Jonesy, for that matter,
or Jonesy,
who's president of hockey operations.
Yep.
Right. One of them should come out and say something that would say, here's why we're doing this. Morgan's not giving us what we need at whatever it is, whatever you say publicly. But for everybody to not say anything, it makes it look worse. And I think that's where you say, well, it's tanking his value. You go, well, yes, it is tanking his value, but it's tanking his value not because he's not playing. It's tanking his value because nobody is telling you why he's not playing. And so therefore you're sitting there thinking, this is not good. This is a player we wouldn't want if you're another general manager. Like there's red flags out the wazoo going up. So I think somebody needs to step in and say why this is happening at this point with Morgan Frost. That's all.
So I'm going to try to be a little bit measured here. But this is the problem that I've had, and I don't want to overreact, because I like to approach this relatively rationally. But what I've seen here over an extended period now, I tweeted about this yesterday. Like, I don't, in my heart of hearts, believe that Morgan Frost is going to turn into a 90-point player. I don't think he's even going to be an 80-point player. I don't think that if you sent him to another team, he's going to all of a sudden blossom and become a guy that I saw somebody yesterday, and this was silly, but somebody goes, he's going to join the ranks of Mike Richards, Jeff Carter, and Patrick Sharp, where you trade them away and you never gave them a chance. I'm like, no, Richards was a really good two-way player. He was your captain. Carter was a sniper. We knew what they were. They just decided to press reset. Sharp was, because the coach hated him. I look at this and I go, all right, I said, none of this makes sense, because when they hired John Tortorella, I was very much of the belief that this team was not on the right track and this team had no shot of doing anything of value and that they needed to blow it up and that John Tortorella is not a rebuilding coach. And I think that ultimately that's going to continue to play out. I was right then, and I will be right from now until the time that he's either relieved of his duties or he moves somewhere else within the organization. I just don't think he's the guy to be the rebuild guy.
I don't have a problem with that, though, Russ. I want to stop you just for a second, because I don't have a problem. Just for a second, I'll let you finish. I don't have a problem with him being the rebuild coach, right? He's going to instill in players a certain way of playing the game that you need to play if you're going to be, a successful team eventually. And so if you look at players on this roster and you say that, let's say, of the current roster, let's say half of the guys on this roster are going to be there when they are a contender again. Mm-hmm. Well, then this is the guy that, he's going to teach them to be pros the right way. And you're going to have some things that you're going to get pissed off about with the way he coaches. He might make them win too much and you don't get a better pick, or he might treat a player badly like he's treating Morgan Frost badly. Yes, those things could happen. You take the good with the bad, right? But the fact of the matter is that the fruits of the labor of John Tortorella as the coach will eventually come out. He may not be the coach when they do, right? But I mean, you talk to the guys who were young players who had a hard time with a certain coach, they'll tell you as they get older and after their careers were over, yeah, I hated it in the moment, but man, I really needed that guy to be my coach.
Not all of them. Not all of them.
Yeah.
Not all of them.
Not
like
all of them.
that I think is like where there's look, I have to be like honest here. I don't think that he's the guy. I think he's a guy who won a Stanley Cup 20 years ago. I think he's a guy who's won 2 Jack Adams, including 2016, 2017, when he had a team that I think overachieved. And like when I look back at it, I say, like, it's cool, and they might have fallen into the same trap that they did when they hired Vigneault, where you say, like, hey, this guy has a fantastic record, and we think that he's going to, lead us to the promised land. Tortorella's not a rebuild guy. He's never been a rebuild guy.
Well, I disagree. He has.
What has he rebuilt?
Tampa? He rebuilt New
20
York?
years ago.
New York? New York was bad when he took over.
What did New York end up winning?
Okay, look, you are of the generation
hold on.
Stop
not only
it.
What did New York win? Which young players did John Tortorella help to build into star caliber players in that rebuild?
You are of the generation
that
measures everything by winning one championship.
Which young players did John Tortorella build into good young star players in that rebuild that you claim that he helped lead? I want names. I'm not letting you do like the bullshit. Here's the macro.
Go ahead, Bundy.
Michael Delzato.
Yeah, like, come on. Like, we're not doing this. If this were a guy who we said, look,
Rick Nash.
Yeah,
I mean,
like if
though? He had a team though, Anthony, in New York. Like he had some pretty good players. He did.
Yeah, but when he took over, they weren't good.
And he had Lundqvist.
Well, of course.
He had a great goalie. He had
the goalie is what helps.
The best goalie of his generation, or one of. Like, come on. We have to be real here. I'm not saying that he's a bad coach. I'm saying I don't think he's the guy who develops these players, and he develops whatever you think are going to be the guys that you want to build around for the next 5 years.
I mean, if you want, so you want me to, I'm going to give you the names. I'm going to give you a couple of names from that New York team.
Go ahead.
I'm going to give you some names from that New York team, okay? Because they were kids when he took over and didn't make the playoffs, and then turned out to be pretty darn good players. How about Ryan Callahan? Is Ryan Callahan a good player?
He's fine.
How about Mark Stahl? Was Mark Stahl been a good player in this league? How about Brandon Dubinsky? He was good for a while, right? I mean, they had a very young team that just could. Dan Girardi, there was a guy who's been around who lasted forever. I mean, he had a very young team that he took over, and look, you're not going to sit there and say, all right, all 20 of these guys we're going to grow them all together. Hockey, just in general, the rosters change over year after year after year. There's so few guys that stay with one team from 1 year to 5 years or 6 years or 7 years. So when you look at it and you say, okay, these guys, he took over a team with a bunch of young players, and 4 of them turned out to be pretty good. At least 3. The 4, I mean, Dubinsky, he was a 20-goal scorer for a little while, but at least 3 of them turned out to be real. No, I mean, Callahan is not reaching. Callahan was 24 when he took over. Stahl was 22.
Mike Richards light.
Yeah, but he was a good player. Dan Girardi, they're all in their early 20s. And they ended up being good players and on a good team. They didn't win a cup. I get it. But the Rangers were a good team. They got to a final. I mean, it's not easy to ultimately win. Like, one team wins every year. It's not. We get so caught up in you have to win a championship. And I'm not trying to sit here and defend Torts for what he's doing with the team. What I'm trying to say to you is we put too much stock in that. And yes, players can develop under a tough coach like Torts. We've seen it happen before.
Go put Jack Callahan in nets for that Ranger team.
Like, I want to be really, really clear here, okay?
Jack Campbell, yes, I said.
I think that Tortorella has the culture. If you're hell-bent on the idea that you're going to instill values into your players, then that's fine. If that's all this is, if that's all this run is going to be through the end of his contract, you have at it. However, it can't be at the detriment of being able to move guys and build the value of guys. I don't think Morgan Frost is going to be some elite player if he moves elsewhere. But continuing to bench him for little to no reason that's been publicly expressed does not actively help his trade value. If you're of the same mindset that I am, that Frost typically plays well against bad teams and doesn't play particularly well against good teams, well, then last night was a great example of a game where he probably should have played. And him not playing doesn't really make a lot of sense. And the more he gets scratched, and to the point that you guys made before, you have Danny Briere and you have Keith Jones, who's great with media, is a fantastic forward-facing president of hockey ops. That's part of his role. Somebody's got to come out and explain it. Because otherwise, you're putting all the onus on the coach who's going to give one-word answers, and that's not okay. Ultimately, you can look at it macro view, and you say, hey, you know what? They lost to a team that they are likely going to be fighting for a top pick in the draft at the end of the season. And if there's ever a tiebreaker, losing this game is great for those odds. But to not have a reason or rationale for why Morgan Frost is the guy who continues to be the whipping boy for the team, when Cam York hasn't played well, when Tyson Forster can't hit the net, when Cates doesn't look great, like, I'm sorry, but like, I have a hard time sitting back and saying, like, no, it's okay, trust the process.
No, I mean, I think that those are two different arguments. I agree with you in a sense that yeah, you know, this has not been right what they're doing to Morgan Frost. And, you know, I was fine with them sitting him out the first time. And okay, maybe it went a couple games too long, but I understood why. But to that quickly come back and bench him again when there are other players who could have had the same fate and brought that room made that room even tighter. Like, okay, it's not just one guy that he's picking on. It could be any one of us at any time. Like, that is where I agree with you that it's not a good thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean what I'm saying about him with the way he treats players a certain way is wrong.
Coaching is weird, like Russ, and I know, like, I've played for seasons where I've had two coaches. One got fired, and one loved me, and the other guy hated me. Maybe not hated you, but just didn't like you as much as the other guy, or you got a guy that hated you, and you get a guy that comes in and likes you. It's all attitude of how you want to treat the player and, you know, what you want to get out of him and how he can be of use to you. I don't get it because a personality shouldn't change, and a lot of guys do take it personally, you know. I do believe there's some degree of that to it, though. I mean, when you get into a longer thing and you have a guy who's bona fide, like, I think just able to play in this league, I always did feel there was some personal edge on a lot of guys. But one thing I can 100% tell you, there's going to be coaches that are going to hate guys no matter what. Maybe just for the way they look walking into the rink in the morning. And that's not fair, but unfortunately that's a reality.
So, Bundy, let me throw this to you then. The notion of, okay, so Torts is a hard ass who's going to instill the values of winning is what we're told and is what they're trying to sell. And years ago, we interviewed Scott Gordon, who took over as the interim coach for this team, who talked about 4 years ago. I went back. I think I just uploaded that one to YouTube, or maybe that's on the plan for today. But he talked about how the current player, and this was 4 years ago, it's still true now. The current player is not the player of 20 years ago, in that the current player wants to have rationale for why decisions are made. And they ask why, not in a disrespectful way, but because they want to understand how they fit in the grand scheme. It's like a different way of thinking about the game. So, like, Bundy, if the idea here is to rebuild, and the idea here is to create a culture, but also realize that, like, all of the guys who are on the roster right now are not going to be on the roster when you are ready to kind of flip the switch.
Of course not.
Is it better to have the hard-ass guy here now who might alienate some of these players, or could it perhaps be a better thing to have a guy who comes in and isn't rainbows and smiles, but is maybe more of an uplifting kind of coach who's going to try to unlock those guys and make them feel empowered to, like, go out and make decisions? Like, where do you land on something like that?
Well, I think, you know, with a coach like Torts, I mean, he came in last year clearly, and we said this required a rebuild. It needed one right away. Probably the wrong coach. He's going to get you 10 or 12 points more than your team is worthy of getting because he's going to coach up. And that's exactly what happened. Exactly what happened. I don't know, like, you know what, you know, and also, I mean, in fairness to him, like, he's lasted through a new regime. Like, they brought a new GM in, a new president, and the coach survived. That's rare, you know, in a lot of ways. But he's also he's got a 4-year deal, making pretty darn good money. The other thing, but the one thing I will say though is that and we complained about this guys a couple of years ago bad, like the competitiveness of this team, the competitive spirit, the determination that was expected on the ice from a team from this city and from the history of this team was unacceptable beyond belief 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yeah. Under Fletcher and that regime. Nobody said anything. They just kept on carrying water and just doing their jobs. But you know what? That was bullshit. And so one thing I'll say about Torts, whether you fucking like him or you hate him, or he's a good guy or a bad guy, and I don't give a shit either way what he is, he held guys accountable and at least brought the organization back to having a work ethic and having a return to culture. He don't know anything about the culture of this team. He's never been here. You can pretend you come in the first week like, oh, I always wanted to coach here. He knew shit about this team. And you know what? I mean, other than the outside stuff. And I'll give him credit for turning a team that had learned to lose, learned to not compete, and he held them accountable enough that they did return to some prominence with work ethic, and that was the one thing we harped on, right, Anthony? Like, we bitched about their lack of work ethic and competitiveness. So to John Tortorella, I salute you for getting that back. You've made the product a lot more watchable, because it was a fucking embarrassment what I watched for 2 or 3 years, and it was unacceptable, and everybody knew it. I'm not the only guy saying it. Every alumni knew it. Everybody whispered around about it. Nobody said anything. Broadcasters kept broadcasting. People kept pushing this thing along, but it was never going anywhere. But I do appreciate Torts is made the team relevant again in the sense that they do work. Results, you're not going to get results if you don't have the horses there to do that.
Right.
And so they're stuck in mud. You can't turn chicken shit into chicken salad. Like, you just can't do it. It's not going to happen that easily. You can't make a guy who's not a goal scorer a goal scorer. You can make a goal scorer a checker, though. That's one thing you can do. And, right. That happens a lot. So, again, I commend him for that, but I don't know what the rebuild's going to look like in 2 years, and whether or not Torts is here still, I have no idea. That's a long time for one coach, going through a rebuild. So he has to also change his entire thinking. Like, he can't coach his team like he did the 2004 Tampa Bay Lightning. He doesn't.
Well, I think that he's said that. I mean, I think that, and we've talked about this off air, and where we've said that, this is a kindler, gentler Torts. There was a time, I would say, go back to his Columbus days, so you don't have to go back that far, where if you lost a game 2-1 to an 0-10-1 team who's gotten blown out in all 11 games that they've played, he would have lost his freaking mind in the press conference last night. And he was more subdued, and so I think that that he has changed a little bit from what his reputation is. And I think that we're looking at this and saying, okay, he's got a real bug up his ass for Morgan Frost. We know that. We see it. Okay, it's evident. But I would sit there and tell you that I think that there are other players who he really, really likes and who are responding to him on this team. Now, there might be a flat line with some players right now that you should be concerned about. But I do think there are players who are excelling under Torts. I think like a guy like Travis Konechny, for example, has been a much better player under John Tortorella, especially this season. Last night, obviously nobody was great, but this season, the way you see TK play is even different than he played last year when he was their best player. So I do think that there are players who do take that next step, who do develop. And we can sit here and complain about the guys that aren't and the way he treats them. And again, like I said, you take the good with the bad. But there are some good steps, too, that we have to recognize and understand that, that's part of coaching, right? I mean, he's getting some players to play at a better level as well. And that should not be overshadowed.
Yeah, TK is a key cog, and you're right. He has responded well. He scored a lot of goals under Torts. But you know what? Morgan Frost did too last year.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Second half of the year. I mean, what you can only get, you can't get blood from a stone, and Morgan Frost gave as much as I think he was capable. I still think there's another gear there, but you got to let him play, and it's clear that's not going to happen here.
Yeah.
So.
The one other thing I did want to talk about again is the power play.
I was just going to say it.
Because it's so bad. It's so bad, and we've heard him say the things that need to be said about it, And obviously they know what they need to do. The coaching staff. It's like it's like, well, we need a better coach. I got a DM from a guy today who said, Danny should put them on notice to fix the power play or else. And I'm going to sit here and say, who's scoring on this power play? Like the difference between being a good 5-on-5 player, and Bundy, I think you'll agree with this. Good 5-on-5 players, guys who score at even strength, score basically off of determination. Right? They go in, they're willing to hunt the puck. They have great, they're going to find a teammate. They're going to make a play. They're going to do something, and it's built more out of the determination to win 50-50 plays and make things happen. On the power play, it's 95% about skill. And it's about who are your best passers, who can move the puck the best, who's got a great shot, this and that. That's where your high-end talent comes in. That's why the best power plays in hockey are all teams that have star quality forwards, right? If you're a team that doesn't have a star quality forward on your team, you're going to struggle on the power play. You're just going to struggle on the power play. That's just the nature of it. This power play is really ugly. It's really bad. And it was probably the reason they lost last night, again, going 0 for 4 against a bad Sharks team. And so you sit there and say, you have to do the simple things when you are a simple team. It really is that. Just get pucks on net and crash the net. I know it sounds so, garage league, right? Because that's how you score, because nobody's got that vicious shot from the top of the circle, in your beer league, right? I mean, you're going to go down there, just get to the front of the net, create havoc, and somebody will bang it home. And they just won't do it. And I don't understand why they don't try to at least just jumpstart the power play with that kind of mentality. And then you want to try and do some other things after that. Okay, fine. But at least get it started on a way to force that, force the penalty kill to kind of play you differently. Right now, they're just standing there in a box saying, yeah, you want to pass it around out to the outside all day for 2 minutes? Go nuts, guys. That's what they're doing.
I was joking about that at the game the other day with you, Anthony. I said, if I'm a defenseman, I would have said, boys, that's some beautiful perimeter passing you're doing here. And if you keep doing it for another 20 minutes and another minute and 20 seconds, you'll have filled your own power play. But thanks a lot. You don't have to do anything. Just got to stand there. If I'm the defenseman, I just stand between the low face-off dot and the hash mark. I'm not moving.
Yeah.
I can actually go 3 feet each way with the Flyers power play if I'm a killing defenseman on the left side. Oh, pass down. Let me go down and shade it down here. Pass back. Let me go back. Where the problem is what they fucking refuse to do is put it to the point and shoot.
Yes.
That's where the hard play to defend is, because then you got to spin. You're looking for guys flying to the net. You got your eyes looking over here when there's someone over there. How do you not do it like that easy? Like, is someone trying to set up a power play that was for the 84 Oilers?
Right.
Like, simplify the power play. John LeClair's over there right now. I know John LeClair should go out on the ice with the power play and show them how to score goals. Because I'll tell you what, it ain't John LeClair in front. It's just having a body in front and being willing to outcompete guys in front of that. This is not a power play that should be elaborate or have a whole lot of scheme to it. It should be get it back to the point, pump it to the net, and get after the puck.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
I guess I don't understand why they haven't fixed that yet. Like, why?
But what can you? But how are you fixing it?
No, doing exactly what we've been talking about all season.
But what I'm telling you, Russ, is they've said it. Torts has said it multiple times.
Yeah, he has.
We need to be simple. We need to just get shots on goal. He said, I think at the one press conference, he said, I don't want to make it sound like it's just shoot and go get the rebound, but like that's what he's saying it. So they're probably telling the players this, and it's just not registering for these players. And that's what the frustration is for the coaching staff, I'm sure. But the players, ultimately, we could yell and complain about coaches all we want. Ultimately, the results have to come from the players on the ice. They have to do this. They're not doing it. They're not taking it. They're trying to get too cute to find something that's not there, or they're not skilled enough to complete. And that's the problem.
Yeah. One other thing before we head out. There was a rumor that came out that the Flyers and Owen Tippett might at some point look to get a deal done. And the number that had been thrown out there seems ludicrous. But the number that came out was that Owen Tippett's camp could look for $7+ million a year. Now, this team is what it is. This team is capable of what it's capable of. Owen Tippett is a nice player. Is he a $7+ million a year player? I'm not so sure.
So let me ask you a question.
Is this a case of the player can ask for whatever the hell he wants? It doesn't mean the team has to give it to him. Or is this posturing? Like where do you land?
I don't think it's either. I'm not convinced on the report. If you noticed, if you go into the tweet where that was one of the tweets that was mentioning this, because I think it was a couple of different people who put it out there. The actual agency that represents Owen Tippett replied to the tweet and said, "This report is 100% false."
Wow.
So the agency was like, no, not true at all.
I mean, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Anthony.
No, I'm just saying, like, agents don't do that. Like, if an agent, let me give you a little inside baseball. If an agent tells a reporter information that they want for, they want to get out there for their player or whatever, blah, 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 they'll give it to you, and they'll, usually tell it to you off record or say, don't give that, don't say that I gave it to you or whatever. And then you put it out there, and then they just let it go and see how the reaction is, et cetera, et cetera. An agent doesn't usually respond to a report and say it's bullshit unless it's actually not what the agent is saying. I mean, what's the benefit in that information being out there from the agent? You know what I'm saying? And I can promise you the team isn't telling a reporter, yeah, we're negotiating this, and this is what they're asking for, and we're going to give it to them, or we're close to that, whatever. They're not going to say that unless it's about to happen. So the combination of things here just don't add up. And so for the agency to come out and answer the tweet really quickly and say it's not true at all tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, and also it's weird too, Andy, because usually like the agents will you have something that you could kind of throw chum out a little bit, and I understand there's the guys that they'll make a case that there's similar guys that are making close to him. But if you look last year, I just had stats, and if I'm playing a GM, if I'm Danny Briere, my negotiation's fairly easy. He can't right now make more than Joel Farabee made. He just can't because you signed him. He was your developed guy. He had 18 of 27 goals last year that Owen Tippett had were against non-playoff teams or empty net goals. 18 of the 27 goals he scored last year. So, if you're talking about Morgan Frost having down numbers, Tippett's were almost matched to what Morgan Frost's were. And they want to see it. Remember I said beginning of the year, and Anthony, you know it, you have to keep showing the goal scoring. When you show it once, you can't just disappear. You have to always show it. That's why it's so difficult being a goal scorer in the league and have expectations. But when you look at it, you need to see more of a sample size. I think if you're Briere, if that's really the number, which I don't believe it is, I think there's a more rational number because Danny, if I'm the GM talking to his agent, he's actually got some stats on his side that would avoid having to pay that kind of money for a player.
In all honesty, I can't imagine, even without the agency saying what they said, I can't imagine that they would look at what Owen Tippett's provided so far and said, oh yeah, he's a $7 million a year player. Like, I just don't see it. There's no
right that you traded for him. You're like, wow, we got a guy for Jerusalem. Let's sign him because we have to salvage it. Owen Tippett is absolutely an NHL player. Yeah. He's been a great find for this team. There's no doubt. But if you're talking about $7 million, then you should have 9 or 10 goals right now.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Do we have who had the original report about that?
So I think it was Anthony DeMarco who had the original report.
Is he the one that they replied to?
No, they replied to Dylan Robillard.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to make sure we have our ducks in a row.
Yeah. Yeah. They replied, yeah, it's WD Sports and Entertainment. If you at WD _ Sports Agency, if you want to pull it up, the actual tweet is zero truth to this report.
The weird thing is, like, I don't remember an agency ever doing that. Like, it's that is a
they do. I mean, yeah. I mean, there are agents who are
pretty rare.
There are agents who are active on Twitter and talk about their players.
Yeah,
both in a positive, obviously always in a positive light, but they also respond to things regarding their player. Usually is in a defensive way of doing it. But yeah, this was an entire agent. This wasn't even the specific agent. It was the entire agency. Replying that there's zero truth to it.
Yeah. Going to answer this, guys. Frost is an NHL player. Owen Tippett had 1 year. They're expecting more. Okay, if you go through the league, I want you this gentleman here, Dan GC, go watch hockey for 4 nights, as many games as you can, and then come back and let me know if Morgan Frost is still not an NHL player.
Yeah,
the league is diluted. There are too many teams, and there are about to be even more. Frost is an NHL player. I think the real debate is what his actual ceiling is. And we won't know, in fairness, we will not know until he's on another team. Because as of right now, as we let off the show with, this coach just does not seem to believe in him. And as Bundy kind of alluded to, this no longer feels like a motivational tactic to try to get the best out of the player. It's unfortunate because if he does move on and does end up becoming a good player for another team, then you'll probably kick yourself as an organization. But we'll see. The Tippett thing, real quick, the cap is going to go up. If you can get Owen Tippett signed at like $5 million a year for like 3 years or something like that, that might not end up being a bad deal. Because even if he doesn't blossom into the guy that you think he could be, he's still a good player, and he still fits the mold of what this coach and what this organization apparently are going to value going forward. I'm always Mr. Sunken costs shouldn't figure into future expenditures. So just because he was part of the deal for Claude Giroux doesn't mean that you are required to actually go and extend him. But I do think he's a good player. And as the cap goes up, a $5 million cap hit is going to be a bargain as long as even if he's only a 20-ish, 25 goal scorer.
Look, here's the thing with Tippett. He's making $1.5 million this year, and then he's an RFA going into next season, right? So it's not like it's a situation where he has to be signed or else he's going to go somewhere else. He probably will. They're not going to. I don't think they're going to sign. I honestly don't think they're going to sign him until after the season, right? They're going to let the season play out, see what kind of year he has, and then make the contract offer. Off of a 2-year determination. Say, hey, this is what you did over the last 2 years. Boom. And, could I see him getting that a contract similar to what Farabee got? Yeah. I think that ultimately you could get something along those lines, maybe for a shorter term. Maybe maybe you're not looking at it being a 5-year deal. Maybe it's a more of a bridge type thing. But I think he could ultimately be in that $5 million range. But if he were going to pay him $7 million, he'd become the second highest player on the team.
Right.
Like, is Owen Tippett the second best player on the team that he deserves that contract? No. No. So that's why I think it's ridiculous to even say that that's the number, because it's not anywhere close to realistic.
I think that's fair. I'm afraid to say this out loud. No, I'll tell you guys about it after. We got a ridiculous retweet. I'm not gonna say on air what it was. All right. I think we've probably touched on everything we were going to. We somehow have once again turned the morning after show into almost a regular episode of Snow the Goalie. It's supposed to be a 15-minute show. We did almost an hour. I do want to let people know that we are looking at the calendar. We're trying to figure out, and we're going to start releasing, I think, an idea of which days we're going to be doing live, which days we're going to be doing morning. It's clear. We do press row show home games. We do the morning after recap for road games the day after. But we do want to be a little bit more clear about when we're going to have actual episodes of the regular Snow the Goalie show. We appreciate everybody who checked in. We had over 150 people here live at around 9:15 this morning. We had a lot. We had over 100 on YouTube alone. Then we picked up another 50-something plus through Facebook and the Twitter. So that's pretty cool. So big thank you to everybody who checked in. If you're watching this live or if you're watching it after the fact on YouTube, please make sure you hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you're notified whenever new episodes drop. And I will warn you, there are old episodes of Snow the Goalie going into the YouTube channel. They're in the playlist of Snow the Goalie episodes. So there are going to be, over the next few days, you might get notifications about like episode 31 hitting. There were people yesterday who listened to one or two of the episodes that went up, and one of them was with Scott Hartnell when he got recognized at a game a few years ago. And we interviewed him in like NBA Room 2 or whatever it was before he went out for pregame. Yeah. And there was somebody who was like, "Oh, Heartsy, thanks for all the memories." I'm like, "Well, that's really sweet." Except the interview, as it notes in the description, is like 3 or 4 years old. But hey, you do you, honey boo boo. So, big thank you to everybody who checked out the show. We got a Bundy bomb less than 5 minutes in.
First word today. First word.
There was a guy on Twitter who told me, "Can't wait to hear you toe the line for your employers." Well, I think that not only are they not our employers, but I think we can also point out the fact that we were pretty critical of the team today. So if for some reason you have this misconception in your mind that we've gone soft.
We are not critical. We are honest. And there's a difference.
That's true.
There's a difference.
All right. Everybody have a great day out there. We will be back. What's the let me look at the calendar here. And you should have it committed to memory. What?
You don't even know when they play. You don't know when they play.
We
again?
got back-to-backers coming up. We got a Friday.
It's Friday,
Anaheim
Saturday.
at 10 p.m. and a 10:30 LA. I love the 10:30 starts. I will leave you with this. I said it on the pregame last night with Jason Martinez. Any team in the Eastern Conference that goes out west should be capped at a 10 p.m. start time. 10:30 start should be completely obliterated for Eastern Conference teams going out west. The starts are too late. People still want to watch their team. 10 o'clock brings some reason into it. 10:30 start shifting the clock past 1 o'clock Eastern, and that's not fair to the fans here in Philly or Eastern Conference teams trying to watch their team.
This is an interesting trip for them because now they're going to get I think they have a day off too in LA. So a bunch of guys. One thing I guess we should have maybe talked about. Maybe we could do an episode.
We'll do a Snow the Goalie either tomorrow or Friday. Let's
we'll do
plan
one before
on doing
Friday.
one, and we have some other stuff to break.
But they're gonna get days off in LA. They're gonna be in Vegas for 4 days. Like they're gonna be spending. I know, right?
What could possibly go wrong?
They're gonna be spending some time together on the road here, and I think that's a good thing. And Torts actually addressed this the other day, which I thought he had some really funny things to say about it. We should talk about that. So.
We've got that. I think we can probably round out what we think is going to happen over the remainder of the first 20 games of the season. We'll get back to that. And we can maybe we'll come up with our top 2 or top 3 surprise or breakout guys and top 3 disappointing players so far. We'll do some fun stuff. It'll either be tomorrow or Friday. Keep your eyes peeled to social media where we'll announce that. We'll be back Saturday morning with the morning after to break down the game against the Ducks. We'll be back Sunday morning to break down the game against the Kings. Big thank you to everybody who watched live. Big thank you to everybody who watches after the fact and listens in the podcast feed. We can't do the show without you, so we do appreciate you. Make sure you go over to youtube.com/@snowthegoalie to subscribe. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. So for Ant, at SanFilippo, for Bundy, at Therien6, I'm Russ, at Joy on Broad. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for watching, maybe even listening to Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. Morning after recap. Well, there's always next time. Have a great day, everybody.